Hello, Starlight, and welcome to Bookworm Echoes. Whether you're returning or discovering this story for the first time, I'm so glad you're here. Now dim the lights, get comfortable, and let the story unfold. Chapter 31, the start of Year 3. Time skip, train station, Year 3. James was the one who ran through the wall first after he told Hayley that he needed to speak to Sirius about something important. Hayley nodded as she rolls her eyes before she starts to run through the wall to see the Hogwarts train. She looks around and sees new students being shy, while others are talking about different things like Quidditch and newts and owls. She spots James talking to Sirius while looking around Remus. Then her gaze moves to Iris, which she froze at. Iris has longer hair, which is tied back into a ponytail, copper strands catching the light like they were spun from autumn itself. Even pulled back, it refuses to be entirely neat. Soft waves slipping to frame her face in a way that feels almost unfair. For a moment, the noise of the platform seems to dull. Steam curls thickly around the scarlet engine. Trunks bang against the trolley wheels. Someone shouts about a forgotten toad. But Hayley barely registers any of it. Her attention fixes, quite unhelpfully, on the way Iris stands beside Lily, her fingers curled loosely around the strap of her bag. She looks taller, or perhaps it's simply that she's carrying herself differently this year. Shoulders straighter, chin slightly lifted, like she's already decided she belongs here. Iris laughs at something from what Lily has said, and for some reason, it felt like music to Hayley's ears, but she snaps out of something before she walks over. "Hey," Hayley says as she walks over to them, until she sees a trolley that Iris is pulling as she smiles at Hayley. Iris notices the look and looks at the trolley before back at Hayley. "Oh, this. I want to show everyone something that us Mugglesborns like to listen to." Hayley looks over to Iris, and she notices how Iris's eyes start to twinkle whenever she is happy. Her blue eyes bright like the ocean when her face is lit up. As they talk to each other, Hayley's magic was humming, but it died down as one of the Slytherins walks past them with a smirk on his face as he looks at Hayley. Hayley's body shudder from that, but her focus shifts from Iris to Walburga, who is looking at her. Not in disgust like she does with James, but with intrigued, like she knows something Hayley doesn't. But her eyes move away once she saw Euphemia stepping closer to Hayley in a protective stance. Her eyes land on Regulus, who is looking for Sophia, but his eyes snap back to her as she's talking to him. Iris leans into Hayley as she whispers, "That was weird." Hayley looks over to Iris and nods. "Yeah, it was. But come on, let's get on the train before James have a brother hissy fit about where I am." Iris laughs again, which made Hayley's stomach flutter. But she doesn't say anything as they both step onto the train and into their compartment and spoke about anything and everything as the train moves to Hogwarts. Chapter 32, to Gryffindor Chaos. Time skip the Great Hall. Hayley and Iris walk to the Great Hall after arriving at Hogwarts, talking about the middle of term as they get to visit Hogsmeade. She walks over to the Gryffindor table and sat down next to the rest of Year 3s. Iris leaned slightly towards Hayley as she murmured, "Think the first years are panicking yet?" Hayley huffed out a quiet laugh. "Probably." Hayley's eyes scanned the Gryffindor table out of habit, and Remus was already there. Of course he was. He sat halfway down the table, shoulders slightly hunched over a scroll he was reading with intense concentration. His brow furrowed like he was trying to memorize every word before classes even started. Across from him, Sirius was leaned back in his seat, boots hooked loosely around the bench rung like he owned the place. He didn't look remotely concerned about school. James sat beside him, talking animatedly with his hands with Sirius, listened with an amused smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Hayley caught a fragment as they walked past. "I'm telling you, Moony," James was saying. "It'll work this time." Remus didn't look up. "You said that the last 3 times." Sirius snorted. "That's because the last 3 times Prongs forgot step 1. James turned toward him with a glare. "I did not forget." "You absolutely did." Hayley rolled her eyes fondly as she slid onto the bench beside the other third years. Iris sat beside her, still watching the marauders like they were some kinds of live entertainment. They're going to get detention before the term even starts. Again, Hayley added. Dumbledore stands up and walks to the stand to start his speech. Welcome to another year at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. A few scattered cheers broke out immediately. Dumbledore's eyes twinkled. For those returning, he continued, welcome back to another year of learning, friendship, and I suspect the occasional misadventure. Several Gryffindors laughed. Hayley noticed Sirius grinned slightly at that. For our new students, Dumbledore said, glancing toward the entrance doors, welcome to what I hope will become a place you consider a second home. Hayley shifted slightly in her seat. She remembered standing in that same place 2 years ago, stomach twisted in knots while waiting to be sorted. Dumbledore continued calmly. A few reminders before we begin the year. The Forbidden Forest remains forbidden to all students. Several students groaned quietly, and Dumbledore's eyes twinkled again. And Mr. Filch has asked me to remind you that the list of banned items has once again grown considerably longer this year. James leaned toward Sirius. That's your fault. Worth it, Sirius replied without hesitation. Remus sighed into his scroll. Dumbledore clasped his hands together. Before we can begin our feast, we must welcome our newest students. Right on cue, the doors opened. A line of nervous first years stepped inside behind Professor McGonagall. They looked tiny compared to the rest of the hall. Some stared up at the enchanted ceiling in awe. Others clutched their robes tightly, eyes darting toward the different house tables. Hayley spotted one boy near the middle of the line dark hair, trying very hard to look calm even though his shoulders were stiff with nerves. Jake David. He kept glancing toward the Gryffindor table like he was already hopping. McGonagall led them to the front of the hall before turning to face the students. Dumbledore stepped aside with a small gesture of his hand. The sorting, he said cheerfully, will now begin. McGonagall placed the old, patched sorting hat on the stool in front of the first years. For a moment, the hall was completely silent. Then the hat twitched, and a tear near its brim opened like a mouth. And it began to sing. Long before these walls were stone. Before the feast and firelight shone. 4 clever witches, 4 bold men. Built Hogwarts strong and true back then. Gryffindor prized the daring heart. The nerve to try, the will to start. To charge ahead though danger's near. For bravery thrives when faced with fear. Ravenclaw sought the curious mind. The ones who question what they find. Sharp thoughts and wit both keen and bright. Who chase the truth like stars at night. Kind Hufflepuff with patience fair. Taught loyalty beyond compare. Those steady souls who work with grace will always find their rightful place. And Slytherin, with cunning sight, saw ambition burning bright. Those who climb and those who scheme, to shape the world to fit their dream. So place me on your anxious head, and fear not what lies ahead. For though the choice may seem unclear, your truest self will guide me here. The hat finishes singing, and the students erupted into applause. Hayley leaned her chin on her hand, still less terrifying than I remember. Iris laughs as down the table, James leaned toward Sirius. 3 galleons says the first one's a Hufflepuff. Sirius scoffed lazily. 2 says Gryffindor, they always start strong. Remus didn't look up from his parchment. You're both idiots. Professor McGonagall stepped forward holding a long scroll. Her voice cut cleanly through the hall. When I call your name, you will come forward, place the sorting hat on your head, and be sorted into your house. Time skips sorting. She speaks up again. David Jake. Hayley straightened immediately. There he is, she said under her breath. Jake walked forward trying to look confident, but he absolutely failed. His robes were slightly crooked, and he kept pushing his hair out of his eyes. Sirius leaned forward, watching with interest. Tiny. James grinned. That's one got Gryffindor written all over him. Jake sat on the stool, and the hat dropped over his ears, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the hat shouted, Gryffindor. The Gryffindor table erupted. Hayley immediately stood halfway up and clapped. Jake pulled the hat off looking stunned. Hayley pointed firmly to the seat across from her. Over here. He hurried over, cheeks red but grinning. James ruffled his hair the second he sat down. Well done, Nipper. Jake blinked at him. Thanks. Sirius smirked. He looks terrified of you. I have that effect, James said proudly. McGonagall continued. Jones Hestia. A quiet girl stepped forward. The hat barely touched her head before shouting, Gryffindor. Another cheer from the table. Hayley clapped again. Good start, she muttered. McLagan Rory. A first year, nearly tripped walking to the stool. Hayley winced. Oh no. Iris smiled. Chaos magnet already. Rory sat down, knocking the stool slightly sideways. The hat slid down over their eyes. Loud thoughts, loyalty, enthusiasm. Oh yes, best put you. Gryffindor. Rory yanked the hat off, looking like they'd just won the Quidditch Cup. He ran toward the table. Halfway there, they tripped over the bench leg. Sirius burst out laughing. Perfect Gryffindor. Rory landed next to Hayley and immediately whispered, Did you see that? I nearly fell in front of everyone. You did fall, Iris said calmly. Rory beamed. Worth it. James leaned toward Sirius again. 4 Galleons says the next one's Slytherin. Sirius smirked. You're terrible at this. McGonagall called the next name. Patterson Danny. Danny looked calmer than most of the others. The hat took a little longer this time. Then shouted, HUFFLEPUFF. The Hufflepuff table cheered warmly. Rory waved at him anyway. Danny waved back awkwardly. Shunpike Stan. The hat barely hesitated. HUFFLEPUFF. Fletcher Mundungus. A scruffy-looking boy stepped forward. Hayley narrowed her eyes. He looks like trouble. The hat paused longer than usual. Clever, slippery, perhaps. SLYTHURIN. The Slytherin table clapped politely. James leaned back. Called it. You didn't, Sirius said. I felt it spiritually. Remus sighed. Time skip, Gryffindor table. Jake sat between Hayley and Rory, looking overwhelmed. Rory leaned across him. So do you know any spells yet? Jake nodded proudly. I learned jelly legs. Hayley raised an eyebrow. Please don't use that on anyone important. Rory looked impressed. You should use it on James. Jake looked horrified. James leaned over the table immediately. Absolutely do not do that. Sirius grinned. Do it. Remus pinched the bridge of his nose. It's the first night. Jake leaned toward Hayley quietly. This place is a bit mad. Hayley smirked. You get used to it. She gestured subtly toward James and Sirius. Those two are the worst of it. James overheard. We prefer the term legends. Sirius raised his goblet. To Gryffindor chaos. Rory raised his enthusiastically. Jake hesitated, then raised his too. Hayley shook her head, but she was smiling. Somewhere at the front of the hall, Dumbledore stood again. The final first year had been sorted. He spread his arms cheerfully. Now that our new students have joined their houses. His eyes twinkled. Let the feast begin. The golden plates filled instantly with food. The hall exploded into noise again. And just like that, another year at Hogwarts had begun. Chapter 33, The Plan to Save a Friend. Time skip, Great Hall. The food appears in front of each table. All the new first years look surprised. Hayley looks over to Jake and David. Eat up, boys. You might need the fuel for your classes. Jake and Rory look at each other before nodding to Hayley and starts to grab what they want and starts to eat. Hayley grabs her food and she eats her food. but she notices James and Sirius whispering about the library. She doesn't want to interrupt them, so she finishes her food. James whispers to Sirius, "Once we have no classes, me, you, and Peter go to the library and do a bunch of research." Sirius nods, then his eyes flicker to Hayley and Iris and whispers back, "What about the Munchkins? Should we tell them?" James hesitates for a moment as he thought about Hayley's powers, then he shakes his head as he replies quietly, "I don't know what would happen if she tried this with us." Remus looks between Sirius and James. "Are you still talking about?" James glared at Remus and points to Hayley with his eyes, which Remus stops talking, then he sighs. James whispers to Remus, "Yes, because me and Sirius thought that you might need someone to stay, especially during." He looks over to Hayley again, who is speaking to Jake before looking back at Remus. "Your illness." Remus's expression softened with both gratitude and guilt. "You don't have to do that." Sirius scoffed, "Of course we do." Peter nodded enthusiastically. "Friends stick together." Remus looked down at his plate, clearly touched. Across the hallway, Hayley narrowed her eyes slightly. They were definitely hiding something, but she couldn't hear enough to understand it. Iris leaned closer. "What are they whispering about?" Hayley shrugged as she stabbed her toast with exaggerated seriousness. "Probably a prank, which means we'll find out when Professor McGonagall starts yelling." Iris laughed. "That does seem to be their pattern." Hayley smirked. Time skip, history of magic. The third years shuffled slowly into the classroom. History of magic had a reputation, mostly for being the most boring subject in the entire castle. Hayley and Iris took their usual seats halfway back. Jake and Rory collapsed into the desks behind them. The classroom door was closed, which meant only one thing. Iris sighed dramatically. 10 seconds. Right on cue, Professor Binns floated through the blackboard. Hayley blinked slowly. Even after 3 years, the sight of a ghost casually drifting through solid stone was still mildly unsettling. Professor Binns drifted to the front of the classroom and began lecturing immediately. And the Goblin Rebellion of 1612 remains one of the most misunderstood uprisings in magical history. Hayley rested her chin in her hand. Her quill hovered lazily over parchment. Behind her, Rory whispered, "Is he ever exciting?" Jake whispered back, "I think he died from boredom." Hayley snorted quietly. Iris kicked the leg of her desk to stop her laughing. Up front, Binns continued droning without noticing anything. Hayley tried to take notes. She really did. But halfway through the lecture, her handwriting slowly turned into random doodles. A snitch. A wand. A tiny cartoon, James being chased by Professor McGonagall. Iris peeked over. "You're drawing again." Hayley whispered back, "It helps me stay awake." Time skip, common room. The Gryffindor common room glowed warmly with firelight. Students filled the armchairs and rugs. Some were studying. Others were playing wizard chess. A group of fourth years were loudly arguing about Quidditch statistics. Hayley sat curled in one of the window seats with parchment spread across her lap. Her quill scratched softly across the page. Iris sat beside her reading a charms textbook. Hayley paused and then began writing again. Time skip, Hayley's letter. Dear Mum and Dad. First day back was chaotic as usual. The first years nearly fainted when the food appeared at breakfast, which honestly never gets old to watch. James is already whispering about something with Sirius and Peter. I'm fairly certain it's either a prank or something involving the library, which somehow feels more suspicious. Remus looks tired again, though. I think the full moon must be soon. Classes are the same so far. Professor Binns nearly put the entire class to sleep again. Iris kicked me under the desk because I started drawing instead of taking notes. Some things never change. Tell Dad I'm still practicing the defensive spells he showed me this summer. And tell Mum I promise I'm eating properly. Love. Hayley. Time skip, back in the common room. Hayley blew gently on the parchment to dry the ink, then rolled the letter neatly. Iris looked up, writing home. Hayley nodded. Figured I should before James inevitably blows something up. Iris smirked. That's optimistic. Across the room, James and Sirius were whispering again. Hayley eyed them suspiciously. Definitely a prank, she muttered. Iris followed her gaze. Oh, absolutely. Neither of them noticed Remus watching the fire quietly, or the determined looks James and Sirius exchanged. Their research had already begun, and if they succeeded, Remus would never face the full moon alone again. Chapter 30, 4 Staircases, Secrets, and Starmen. Time skip hallway. Hayley walks to her next class with Iris, as Iris speaks about starting to play music for everyone that she listens to. Hayley smiles as she walks, and she could listen to Iris ramble on and on about herself without getting annoyed. Iris looks over to Hayley, ready to listen to the Pointer Sisters. Hayley blinked, but Iris continued before she could respond. I do have 2 record players for the boys, so they can try out singers like David Bowie or Led Zeppelin. She puts one finger on her chin as she thinks to herself and looks at Hayley again. I think I know a perfect band that James might like. Hayley looked at her, completely confused. She had absolutely no idea who any of those people were, but she listened anyway. Behind them, 2 much smaller footsteps hurried to keep up. Jake David and Rory McLagan. The first 2 years looked slightly overwhelmed by the moving maze that was Hogwarts. Jake leaned closer to Rory. Wasn't potions the other way? Rory frowned. I thought the stairs moved. Jake looks at him. They do. Rory shakes his head. That doesn't help. Hayley glanced over her shoulder. You 2 all right back there? Jake nodded quickly. We're good. They absolutely were not good, but Iris slowed her walking slightly so they could keep up. Don't worry, she said casually. You'll only get lost about 100 times before Christmas. Jake stared at her. That's supposed to make me feel better. Hayley chuckled quietly, and just as they turned the corner, they collided with James and his friends. James stood with Sirius, Remus, and Peter. James was whispering something quickly to Sirius, while Remus listened with a concerned expression, while Peter kept glancing around like he expected someone to overhear. Hayley caught the tail of the whisper. After potions, James muttered. Sirius grinned as they're going through with the plan. Straight to the library. Remus rubbed his temple. You know if we get caught. We won't, Sirius said. James noticed Hayley watching them, and his expression immediately changes to something far more innocent. Potions, he said casually. Sirius nodded. Thrilling. Hayley raised a brow, but said nothing, and Iris leaned closer to her and whispered. They're definitely planning something. Hayley looks over to Iris as she whispered back. Obviously. The classroom door opened, and a teacher's voice called out. Inside. Everyone moved immediately. Time skip potions class, 30 minutes later. The dungeon classroom smelled faintly of herbs, melted beetle shells, and something sweet Hayley couldn't quite identify. At the front of the room stood Professor Horace Slughorn, his round face cheerful as he clapped his hands together. Well then, my young potion makers, he boomed warmly. Today we'll be brewing a strengthening solution, a very useful potion, especially if one finds themselves lifting heavy objects or outrunning a troll. A few students laughed. Slughorn waddled between the tables, peering curiously into cauldrons. Hayley and Iris worked at one table, while Jake and Rory stood awkwardly nearby. The 2 first years looked completely overwhelmed. Jake whispered nervously, Are we supposed to be here? Rory shook his head. Probably not. Slughorn noticed them and blinked. Well now, he said pleasantly, you 2 look a bit geographically confused. Jake nodded quickly. We got lost. Slughorn chuckled. Happens all the time. Hogwarts staircases have a mischievous sense of humor. He gestured toward an empty corner table. Stay there for the moment. Perhaps you'll learn something useful before finding your way to the correct classroom." Jake and Rory nodded gratefully. Meanwhile, Iris leaned closer to the cauldron. "You know," she whispered to Hayley, "David Bowie would absolutely be good potion brewing music." Hayley blinked. "Iris." "What?" "Focus." Across the room, James leaned toward Sirius. "Library," he whispered. Sirius grinned immediately. Peter looked nervous. "Now." Remus sighed. "If we get caught." Slughorn suddenly appeared beside them. "Well now, Mr. Potter." James sat up straight instantly. "Yes, Professor." Slughorn smiled pleasantly. "I do hope that whispering concerns the potion and not mischief." "Of course, sir." Slughorn nodded approvingly. "Excellent spirit." The moment he moved away, Sirius leaned over again. "Library." James grinned. A few minutes later, the potion simmered slowly. Hayley crushed a few ingredients, while Iris stirred the cauldron with exaggerated seriousness. Jake leaned over their shoulder. "Is it supposed to bubble like that?" Hayley glanced at it. "Yes." Rory looked impressed. "Cool." Iris whispered quietly. "I'm still thinking about music." Hayley sighed. "I know. Imagine brewing potions while Led Zeppelin is playing." "Iris." "What?" "This is why the wizarding world is confused." Jake whispered to Rory. "I don't know what she's talking about." Rory whispered back. "Neither do I." After another 10 minutes, Slughorn clapped his hands. "Well done, everyone. Leave your potions where they are. We'll evaluate them later." Students began packing up. James immediately stood. Sirius followed. Remus hesitated. Peter grabbed his bag. They were halfway to the door before Slughorn turned around. "Where are you four heading?" James didn't miss a beat. "Library, Professor, research." Slughorn beamed. "Ah, academic enthusiasm." Sirius nodded solemnly. "Yes, sir." And the four of them disappeared out the door. Hayley narrowed her eyes slightly. "They're definitely up to something." Iris whispered back. "Absolutely." Time skip, transfiguration later. The classroom for Minerva, McGonagall, was bright compared to the dungeon. Sunlight streamed through tall windows. Students sat at wooden desks with small objects placed in front of them. Buttons. Today's lesson. Professor McGonagall stood at the front of the room, sharp-eyed and composed. "We will continue practicing basic transfiguration," she said crisply. "Buttons into beetles." Jake looked horrified. "We're definitely not supposed to be here." Rory whispered back. "Too late now." Hayley sat beside Iris, while the two first-years hovered awkwardly behind them. McGonagall noticed them almost immediately. Her eyebrow rose slightly. "Mr. Jake and Mr. Rory. First years." "Yes, Professor." She stared at them for a moment and then sighed softly. "Sit in the back and observe." They moved instantly. Meanwhile, Iris leaned toward Hayley again. "You know what would be great transfiguration music?" Hayley didn't even look up. "I'm afraid to ask." "The Pointer Sisters." Hayley stared at her. "Iris." "What?" "We are turning buttons into beetles." And that sentence alone is strange enough. McGonagall tapped her desk with her wand. "Begin." Students muttered spells quietly. Buttons began twitching. One student's beetle immediately ran off the desk. Jake whispered in awe. "That's brilliant." Rory whispered back. "That's terrifying." Iris flicked her wand. Her button turned into a beetle, then immediately flipped onto its back. Hayley's transformation was nearly perfect. McGonagall walked past and nodded slightly. "Very good." After several attempts, Iris managed a successful transformation. She looked very proud. "See," she whispered, "music improves magical focus." Hayley shook her head but smiled. Time skip, Gryffindor common room, later. The fire crackled softly in the large stone fireplace. Students relaxed in armchairs after the long morning of classes. Hayley sat on the couch, while Jake and Rory collapsed nearby. "I never want to see a staircase again," Jake groaned. Rory nodded. "Hogwarts is huge." Iris appeared a few minutes later, carrying a strange box with wires and a record sleeve. Hayley immediately recognized the look on her face. "Oh no." Iris grinned. "Oh yes." She set the record player down on the table. Several students looked curious. "What's that?" someone asked. "A Muggle music player," Iris said proudly. Jake leaned forward. "Wait, this is the music you were talking about." "Yes." She pulled out the vinyl record. "Everyone," Iris announced dramatically, "prepare yourselves." Hayley rubbed her temple. "This is going to cause chaos." Iris placed the record on the player. The needle dropped. Music crackled softly before starting. Students looked confused, then curious, then intrigued. Jake blinked. "Okay, that's actually good." Rory nodded slowly. "Yeah." Hayley leaned back in the chair with a small smile. Iris crossed her arms proudly. "Told you." And somewhere far away in the castle, however, James, Sirius, and Peter were definitely not doing library research. They were planning for something for a friend in need. Few hours later, the fire crackled inside the Gryffindor common room as students relaxed after the long day of classes. Iris stood proudly beside the strange Muggle machine, sitting on the table. The record player. Hayley leaned back against the couch, while Jake and Rory sat on the floor staring at it like it might explode. "You're sure this is safe?" Jake asked. "Yes," Iris said confidently. "Mostly." Hayley sighed. "That word worries me." Before Iris could answer, the portrait hole opened. James, Sirius, Remus, and Peter climbed into the room. They looked suspiciously pleased with themselves. Remus looked tired. James stopped halfway across the room. "What is that?" Iris grinned. Perfect timing. Iris slid a vinyl record out of its sleeve. "You lot," she announced dramatically, "are about to hear something brilliant." She placed the record down. The needle dropped. Soft crackling filled the room. Then music began. A dreamy guitar and piano echoed through the common room. The voice followed. "There's a starman waiting in the sky." Several students froze. The sound was completely unlike wizarding music. Sirius slowly stepped closer to the table. "What is this?" Iris pointed proudly. "David Bowie." Sirius tilted his head as the chorus swelled. "Let all the children boogie." His eyebrows slowly lifted. "This is brilliant." Hayley blinked. "That was fast." Sirius pointed at the record player. "This sounds like music from another planet." Iris grinned. "That's sort of the point." Jake whispered to Rory. "I think Sirius found his favorite." Rory nodded. "Yeah." Sirius folded his arms, completely absorbed in the music now. "Play another." Iris switched the record. "This one," she said, "is louder." She dropped the needle again. A slow guitar filled the room. Students leaned closer as the music built. Then the voice began. "There's a lady who's sure all that glitters is gold." The room grew quieter. The music slowly climbed like something magical. Sirius leaned forward. "This is incredible." Iris pointed proudly. "Led Zeppelin." The song continued building, powerful and mysterious. "Ooh, it makes me wonder." James laughed. "This sounds like a wizard song." Remus rubbed his temple. "It really does." Sirius looked delighted. "I want more of this band." Hayley leaned toward Iris. "You've created a monster." Iris whispered proudly. "I know." James stepped closer to the table now. "All right," he said. "What's mine?" Iris flipped through the records thoughtfully. "Oh, I have the perfect one." She placed the vinyl down. The needle dropped. Piano exploded through the room. "Mama." Several students jumped. James blinked slowly. That's dramatic. Iris nodded proudly. Queen. The powerful music filled the entire common room. Sirius grinned. This sounds like something you'd sing before a Quidditch match. Remus muttered, That is not how Quidditch works. James looked thrilled. This is brilliant. Jake whispered to Rory, I think James just adopted that band. Rory nodded. Definitely. Remus had stayed quietly in an armchair near the fire. Iris noticed him watching. Oh, she said thoughtfully, I know yours. Remus looked suspicious. You do? Yes. She placed another record down. Soft piano filled the room. Gentle and warm. It's a little bit funny. Remus blinked slightly. The song was quiet compared to the others. Hayley glanced toward him. You all right? Remus gave a small smile. I like this one. Iris pointed proudly. That's Elton John. The chorus floated through the room. This is your song. Remus leaned back, listening quietly. That's beautiful. Sirius looked at him. Moony likes something. Remus sighed. I like many things. James laughed. This is brilliant. Soon half the common room had gathered around the record player. Sirius demanded more Led Zeppelin. James wanted Queen again. Remus quietly asked what other piano music existed. Peter looked completely overwhelmed. Jake leaned toward the speaker. So Muggles just listen to this all the time. Iris nodded proudly. Yes. Rory stared at the machine. They're geniuses. Hayley leaned back with a small smile. You've just changed Hogwarts forever. Iris grinned. Good. Oh, boys, I have another record player for you so you can listen to your favorites whenever you want. Just make sure to keep the room quiet if you're planning on playing it at night so the rest of Gryffindors can sleep. James smirked. No promises. Chapter 30, 5 Honeyjukes and Hidden Feelings. Time skip courtyard. The courtyard was filled with students. Some older students were talking about NEWTS and OWLS, while younger students like Jake and Rory spoke about their classes. Hayley and Iris was sitting on one of the benches, chatting before Iris gasps and grabs Hayley's hand, and she looks over to her. It's our time. Hayley looks at her confused. For what? Iris smiles. We can go to Hogsmeade. We get to finally know the shop James was talking about. Hayley's eyes brightened at that. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Iris nods. We get to see what Zonkos look like. Hayley taps a finger on her chin as she thinks. And Honeyjukes. They start to talk about what they're going to do once they're there. Then, as Iris is speaking, Hayley looks at her as she does a little smile. Her blue eyes looks bright as looking away as she speaks. For a moment, Hayley looks away as she thought about things, like James and his friends acting suspicious. How Snape avoided the Gryffindor common room more often than he did when last 2 years, but Iris snapped her out of her train of thought. Iris looks at her. Are you okay? Hayley nods. Yeah, I was just thinking. Iris looks at her for a moment before nodding. Time skip Hogsmeade. After McGonagall gathered up all the year 3s, everyone went to Hogsmeade. As everyone is walking, the village slowly appeared through the light morning fog. Crooked chimneys, snow-dusted rooftops, and glowing shop windows that made the entire street feel warm despite the winter chill. Students immediately scattered the moment they were released. Hayley and Iris stepped onto the main street, snow crunching beneath their boots. Hayley slowly turned in a circle, taking everything in. Well, she said, this definitely beats studying in the common room. Iris laughed quietly, just slightly. Their eyes immediately landed on the bright pink and gold window display of Honeyjukes. Chocolate frogs hopped lazily inside their boxes, while jars of colorful sweets buzzed and fizzed with magic. Hayley pointed toward the door. First stop. Iris didn't even argue. Time skip Honeyjukes. The moment they stepped inside, a warm, sugary smell wrapped around them. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, stacked with every kind of magical sweet imaginable. Jars clinked softly as enchanted candies bounced inside them. Iris walked straight toward a display of chocolate frogs. She picked up a box and turned it over in her hands. "I've heard the cards move," she said. Hayley grabbed one too, only one way to find out. They walked up to the counter, where the shopkeeper waited. Hayley set her box down along with a small bag she had filled with fizzing Whizbees and a handful of sugar quills. Iris placed 2 chocolate frog boxes down and a small jar of acid pops. The shopkeeper rang them up. "That'll be 4 sickles and 8 nuts." Hayley dug into the small coin pouch. She carried and counted out the silver and bronze coins carefully before sliding them across the counter. Iris paid for her things next, tucking the sweets into her satchel once they were wrapped. The moment they stepped back outside, Iris immediately opened one of the chocolate frog boxes. The frog leapt out before she could grab it. Hayley caught it midair. "First rule," Hayley said, holding it up triumphantly, "never underestimate chocolate." Iris snorted. Time skip, a little farther down the street. They wandered past several small shops before another caught Iris's attention. The windows of Scrivenshaft's quill shop were filled with elegant feather quills that shimmered in the light. Inside, the shop smelled faintly of parchment and ink. Quills floated gently above the display table, slowly spinning so customers could see them. Iris carefully picked up a pale silver feather quill. "Oh, this one writes smoother than my school one," she said, testing it on a scrap piece of parchment. The ink flowed perfectly. Hayley wandered around the shop before finding a darker quill with deep blue feathers. She tested it. The writing came out bold and neat. "Okay, this one is actually good." They both walked to the counter again. Iris paid 2 sickles for the silver quill. Hayley paid 3 sickles for the blue-feathered one. Hayley twirled the new quill between her fingers as they stepped back outside. "Remus is going to be very proud of this responsible purchase." Iris raised an eyebrow. "You bought sweets 5 minutes ago." Balanced decision-making. Time skipped back on the main street. The wind picked up slightly as they continued walking. Students filled the street, laughter echoing between the buildings. Iris pointed across the road toward another shop. "That place looks interesting." The sign above the door read Dervish and Banges. Inside were magical instruments and small enchanted gadgets. Hayley immediately spotted a small, enchanted compass that spun whenever someone nearby cast a spell. She picked it up. "That's actually useful." Iris found a small, enchanted parchment set that copied notes automatically if 2 people shared it. Imagine using this during lectures. Hayley grinned. Or during exams. They paid a few more coins before leaving again, their bags now slightly heavier. Time skipped Zonko's. The bell above the door jingled the moment Hayley pushed it open. Immediately, a burst of laughter and small explosions echoed through the shop. The inside of Zonko's was pure chaos. Shelves leaned crookedly under the weight of prank items. Boxes rattled and shook like they were alive. A display near the window kept randomly bursting into harmless clouds of purple smoke, while a group of older students tested something that sounded suspiciously like a screaming teacup. Iris stopped just inside the doorway and her eyes widened. "Oh, this is exactly what James described." Hayley folded her arms as she scanned the room. "I'm suddenly understanding why the professors hate this place." A loud pop went off behind them. Both girls jumped slightly before turning to see a box labeled Fanged Frisbees, slightly less dangerous version, snapping its little teeth at anyone who walked too close. Iris burst out laughing. Hayley grinned. "Okay, I might like it here." They slowly walked deeper into the shop. A display table near the center held jars filled with tiny silver pellets labeled Dung Bombs. Hayley picked one up cautiously. "This seems illegal." Iris leaned over to read the label, guaranteed to clear any room in seconds. Hayley raised an eyebrow. Remind me to never give this to Sirius. A boy nearby dropped one by accident. The smell spread through the shop instantly. Half the students groaned while the shopkeeper yelled, "Outside if you're testing those." Hayley quickly placed the jar back down. Yeah, definitely illegal. They moved on. Another shelf held small paper packages labeled Peruvian Instant Darkness Powder. Iris carefully picked one up. What does this do? Hayley read the instructions. Apparently it creates instant darkness when thrown. Iris blinked. That seems extremely useful. For pranks, Hayley added. Obviously. They placed one in their small basket. Further down the aisle, Hayley spotted something that made her grin immediately. Trick wands. She grabbed one and flicked it dramatically. Instead of a spell, the wand loudly squawked like a chicken. Iris nearly doubled over laughing. Hayley stared at the wand. Okay, that's amazing. She added one to the basket. Nearby, Iris found a small box labeled sneezing powder. She opened it slightly and read the description. Produces uncontrollable sneezing for 30 seconds. Hayley slowly looked at her. You're thinking about Snape, aren't you? Iris closed the box quickly. I'm not saying yes. Hayley laughed. Add it to the basket. By the time they reached the counter, they had gathered. One trick wand. A small pouch of Peruvian Instant Darkness Powder. A packet of sneezing powder. A tiny box of fizzing firecrackers. The shopkeeper rang them up. 5 sickles. Hayley pulled out her coin pouch again and counted the silver coins before placing them on the counter. Iris grabbed the bag of pranks once they were wrapped. The moment they stepped outside into the snowy street again, Iris looked at the bag like it held treasure. Hayley glanced sideways at her. You're planning something. Iris smiled innocently. I learned from the best. Hayley raised an eyebrow. James. Iris nodded proudly. Hayley shook her head with a small laugh. Merlin helped Hogwarts. Snow continued falling lightly around them as they walked down the street, their bags now filled with sweets, quills, and just enough mischief to cause trouble later. Time skipped back outside. Snow had started to fall lightly now. Hayley popped a fizzing Whizbee into her mouth. Immediately, her feet lifted a few inches off the ground. Iris burst out laughing as Hayley grabbed the edge of a street sign to steady herself. Okay, Hayley said once she landed again. Worth it. Iris shook her head, still smiling. They continued down the snowy street together, bags filled with sweets, new quills, and enchanted trinkets. Hogsmeade buzzed with laughter and magic around them. Hayley notices a cafe called Madame Puddifoot's Tea Shop, and she tilts her head slightly as she thinks about taking Iris there next year, for their first date, if she ever asks her out. And for the first time since the school year started, everything felt wonderfully normal. Chapter 36, Anything for Our Moony. Time skip, Gryffindor Common Room. Hayley's POV. Hayley and Iris arrives at the Gryffindor Tower, holding bags of the stuff they bought at Hogsmeade. Iris looks over to Hayley. I wonder how the first years will react to these. Hayley looks at the bags from Zonko's and she shrugs her shoulders. I don't know. Guess we'll find out. Iris nods, and they both walk into the common room and notices how quiet the room is. Hayley looks at Iris, confused, as Iris looks at her back before shrugging her shoulder as Hayley mutters. Either James and his friends are pulling a prank, or whatever they're whispering about. Jake and Rory ran over to Hayley and Iris, and Hayley snapped out of her train of thoughts, and she hugs Jake back as Rory hugs Iris. Hayley laughs. Hey, easy there. Did the castle collapse while we were gone or something? Iris chuckled, carefully setting her Zonko's bag down before hugging Rory back properly. Hayley glanced down at Jake, noticing the way he kept glancing nervously toward the rest of the common room. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Something definitely happened. And judging by the way everyone kept whispering, it probably involved James. Hayley sighed quietly to herself. Merlin helped me. If James had caused chaos again, while she and Iris were gone. She was absolutely making him deal with the consequences this time. No rescuing him. No covering for him. No. A loud whisper suddenly came from the corner near the fireplace. "She's back." Hayley froze. Her eyes slowly lifted. Half the common room was now looking at her. Hayley blinked. "It's okay," she muttered under her breath. She looked down at Jake again. "What did my brother do this time?" Time skip, library. James's POV. James was in the library with Sirius, who was sat with his feet up, while Peter was looking around to see if the teacher is watching. Remus shook his head, but listens to James. James notices something in the books, and he looks at them as he points to the chapter. "Found it!" and Merlin's beard. Sirius perked up slightly. "That good." James turned the book around so they could see the heading. Advanced Transfiguration. Human to Animal Metamorphosis. Peter blinked rapidly. That sounds illegal." "Not illegal," Sirius said with a grin. "Just strongly discouraged." Remus sighed quietly. "There's a difference." James ignored them both, already reading faster. "All right, listen to this." He cleared his throat dramatically. "To become an Animagus, the witch or wizard must maintain a mandrake leaf in their mouth for an entire lunar month." Sirius's quill stopped spinning. "A whole month," he said. James nodded, still reading. "No swallowing, no removing it, and if the leaf is lost, the process must begin again." Peter groaned. James smirked. "Then try not to choke on a leaf." Remus leaned forward slightly, interest replacing some of his earlier hesitation. "What comes after the month?" James turned the page. "Right. After that, the leaf must be placed in a crystal phial under moonlight, mixed with dew and..." He squinted. "A strand of the wizard's hair." Sirius leaned forward now too, his earlier laziness gone. "And..." James kept reading. "Then, during a thunderstorm, the potion must be consumed while focusing on the desired animal form." Peter's eyes widened. "Desired?" James grinned. "The book says the form is a reflection of your inner self. We won't know what we are until we shift." Remus looked at the page, his voice tight. "You aren't doing this for the adventure, James. You're doing this because of the full moons." Sirius tilted his head thoughtfully. "If I turn into something ridiculous, I'm blaming you." "You'll probably end up a rat," James said casually. Peter froze. "Oi." Remus pinched the bridge of his nose. "You do realize," he said quietly, "that Animagus transformation is ministry-regulated magic." Sirius waved a hand. "Details." "You have to register." "Technicalities." "It's extremely dangerous." James shut the book with a quiet thud and leaned back in his chair, grinning at the three of them. "But imagine it if we could actually do it." James leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "We could be there with you, Remus, every month. A werewolf is only a danger to humans, not to other animals." Sirius's grin turned sharp and determined. "No more locking you in a shack alone, Mooney. We'd be a pack." Peter swallowed. Remus looked between them. James leaned forward again, lowering his voice like he was planning a heist. "No teachers, no prefects, no one knowing it's us." Sirius sat up straight. "I'm in." Peter hesitated. "Do we die if we mess it up?" James shrugged. "Probably." Remus groaned softly. "You three are going to get us expelled." James tapped the parchment where he'd been taking notes. "Or we make sure our best friend never has to spend a transformation in the dark again." Across the library, Madame Pince suddenly cleared her throat loudly. Peter jumped so hard, he nearly knocked the book off the table. Sirius quickly pulled his feet off the chair. Remus calmly turned the page of his book like they had been studying the entire time. James tried and failed not to laugh. Chapter 37, You're a Terrible Liar. Time skip, common room. James and his friends came back from the library, and James notices Hayley sat on the couch writing to their parents. Sirius noticed immediately. "Oh no, you've been spotted." Remus gave James a look, gentler but knowing. You could just tell her the truth. James shot him a look. Absolutely not. Peter hovered awkwardly behind them, eyes flicking between Hayley and James like he was watching a duel about to happen. Hayley looks up from her paper and looks over to James as she puts them down. Hayley speaks up. James, please tell me you did more harmful pranks and not whatever secret you're hiding from me. James froze slightly as his brain goes haywire. Don't say Animagus. Don't say Moon. Don't say Remus. Say anything else. Literally anything else. Sirius watched him, barely containing his grin. Remus looked away, suddenly very interested in the bookshelf. Peter stopped breathing. Before he puts on a smile, yes, I did. Hayley looks at him with her brow raised, not convinced. Oh, she said softly. James nodded again, doubling down. Yeah, brilliant actually, bit of a masterpiece. Sirius let out a small snort behind him, quickly disguising it as a cough. Hayley's eyes flicked past James for half a second, catching Sirius' expression, Remus' avoidance, Peter's panic, and then back to James. Right. She leaned back slightly into the couch, arms crossing, not aggressively, but enough to close herself off. Funny, she added, her tone light but edged, because you look like you've just been caught sneaking out after curfew. Sirius lost it, turning away, shoulders shaking silently. James shot him a glare over his shoulder before snapping his attention back to Hayley. I haven't. Hayley tilted her head again. James. That one word, warning bells. James exhaled, running a hand through his hair. I did do pranks, just not the ones you'd approve of. Hayley held his gaze. Searching. Weighing. For a second, just a second, it looked like she might push harder. Ask the question. The real one. What are you hiding? But then she didn't. Instead, she picked her quill back up, dipping it in ink with controlled precision. Oh, fine, she said. Oh, easily. That was worse than if she'd argued. James frowned slightly. Fine. Hayley shrugged, eyes dropping back to her letter. Fine, she repeated. You're a terrible liar, but I'm choosing to ignore it. Sirius whispered under his breath. That's not ominous at all. Remus elbowed him lightly. Hayley continued writing for a moment before adding quieter. Just, don't do anything stupid, okay? That one landed. Because it wasn't suspicion. It was concern. James' expression shifted, just slightly. Wouldn't dream of it, he said. A lie, of course. And for once, it didn't feel like a harmless one. Across the room, Lily glanced up again, eyes flicking between them, clearly having caught just enough to be curious. By the fire, Jake's exploding snap deck went off with a loud bang, making Rory yelp. The room returned to normal. Laughter, firelight, homework. But underneath it, something had shifted and Hayley knew it, even if she didn't know what. Chapter 38, it's getting stronger. Time skip, herbology. The grounds were alive with movement as students filtered out of the castle, the crisp air carrying the scent of damp earth and fresh grass. Hayley walked beside Iris, her bag slung over her shoulder, robes swaying lightly with each step. The sunlight caught in her hair as she glanced around, taking in the familiar chaos of Hogwarts between classes. Ahead of them, a blur of nervous energy. Move, we're late. Jake sprinted past them, nearly tripping over his own feet as he clutched his broom like it might disappear if he let go. You're the one who wouldn't leave, Rory shouted after him, running just as fast, his tie half undone and his hair sticking up like he just rolled out of bed. It's our first flying lesson. What if we miss it? You can't miss flying, Jake. It's literally in the sky. They disappeared across the lawn, still arguing. Hayley paused for half a second, watching them go, and smiled. Soft. Fond. Iris bumped her shoulder lightly. You're doing that thing again. Hayley blinked. What thing? That look, Iris said, narrowing her eyes playfully. Like you're watching a memory happen in real time. Hayley huffed a small laugh, shaking her head as they continued toward the greenhouses. They just remind me of us a bit. Iris snorted. We were not that chaotic. Hayley gave her a look. Iris paused. Okay, we were exactly that chaotic. They reached the greenhouse, the warm, humid air already pressing against the glass panes. Inside, shapes shifted faintly. Leaves moving, vines curling, something tapping softly against the inside walls like it was waiting. Hayley pushed the door open. The moment she stepped inside, everything changed. The air stilled, and then a rustle. Soft at first, then louder. Iris stopped mid-step behind her. There it is again. Inside the greenhouse, several plants literally turned toward Hayley. A cluster of leafy vines near the entrance dipped downward, like a bow. A row of puffapods quivered, releasing a faint shimmer of silver spores that drifted gently in her direction. Even a stubborn-looking venomous tentacula in the corner seemed to still, its tendrils lowering slightly instead of lashing about like it usually did. Hayley froze, not in fear but in recognition. "Hi," she murmured softly, almost without thinking. One of the vines curled a little closer, brushing lightly against her sleeve. Not aggressive, not invasive. Just there. Iris stared. "Okay," she said slowly, setting her bag down but not taking her eyes off the plants. "I'm officially saying it." Hayley glanced at her. "Saying what?" "They're doing it again." Hayley looked back at the plants, watching as another leaf dipped slightly, like it was acknowledging her. "They're just plants." Iris gave her a look. "Plants don't bow, Hayley." As if on cue, one of the smaller potted plants near the table tilted, just slightly, toward her. Iris pointed. "See." Hayley bit back a smile. "I think they're just reacting," she said, though even she didn't sound fully convinced. "To what?" Iris pressed. Hayley looks over to her. "My magic, I completely forgot." The greenhouse door creaked open again as other students started filing in, their chatter filling the space. The plants slowly returned to normal. Leaves settling. Vines retracting. Like nothing had happened. Iris leaned closer to Hayley, lowering her voice. "That's getting stronger, isn't it?" Hayley didn't answer right away. Her fingers brushed lightly against one of the leaves beside her, and it leaned into her touch. Just slightly. "Yeah," she whispered. And this time, there was no denying it. The greenhouse slowly filled with the low buzz of conversation as students took their places at the long wooden tables. Pots, tools, and dragonhide gloves were already laid out, alongside a selection of plants that looked slightly too aware for comfort. A sharp clap cut through the noise. "Settle down, settle down." Professor Sprout moved between the tables, her hat slightly askew as always, eyes bright with that familiar mix of warmth and don't-test-me energy. "Today," she announced, gesturing toward the plants behind her, "we'll be working with fanged geraniums." A collective groan echoed around the greenhouse. "They only bite if you're careless," she added cheerfully, "which, unfortunately, most of you are." Iris leaned toward Hayley. "That's reassuring." Hayley huffed quietly. Sprout continued. "Your task is simple. Repot them safely without losing a finger. Gloves on, firm grip, and do not hesitate. They can smell it." "Brilliant," Iris muttered. "We're being judged by plants." Hayley reached for her gloves, pulling them on as she glanced down at the geranium in front of her. It stilled. Completely. Its jagged little mouth, lined with thorn-like teeth, slowly closed. Iris blinked. "Nope, no, I saw that." Hayley tilted her head slightly. The plant didn't snap. Didn't lunge. It just watched her. "Okay," Iris said, backing up half a step. "Why is yours behaving?" "I haven't done anything," Hayley replied, though her voice was quieter, now curious. Around them, chaos had already begun. A student yelped as their geranium snapped at their glove. Another knocked over a pot entirely, soil spilling everywhere as the plant tried to wriggle free. "Firm grip," Professor Sprout called. "They'll sense your hesitation." She stopped mid-sentence because she was looking at Hayley. More specifically, at Hayley's plant, which had just lowered itself, not collapsed or gone limp, just lowered, like it was waiting. Iris pointed again, aggressively whispering, That's not normal." Hayley carefully reached forward, hands steady. The geranium didn't bite, didn't even twitch. Instead, its leaves shifted slightly, almost, accommodating her grip. Hayley lifted it from the pot with ease. Across the table, someone shouted as theirs snapped loudly. Iris stared between the two situations. I hate this so much." Hayley bit back a smile, focusing as she gently loosened the roots. "You're not going to bite me, are you?" she murmured under her breath. The plant stayed still, completely cooperative. Iris slowly pulled her gloves on like she was preparing for battle. "If mine takes a chunk out of me while yours is acting like a trained puppy, I'm transferring schools." "Don't be dramatic." "Don't be, Hayley, it has teeth." Right on cue, Iris's geranium snapped at her. "AH." She yanked her hand back, glaring at it. "I hate you." The plant snapped again, as if offended. Meanwhile, Hayley had already repotted hers perfectly and neatly, without a single bite. Professor Sprout approached slowly, her eyes flicking between the two girls. "Well," she said, crouching slightly beside Hayley's table, "that's impressive." Hayley looked up. "Thank you." Sprout leaned in closer to the plant, observing it carefully. "Curious," she murmured. The geranium remained still. Calm. Obedient. Sprout straightened, looking at Hayley now, not unkindly, but with clear interest. "Have you worked with fanged geraniums before, Miss Potter?" Hayley shook her head. "No, Professor." A pause. Sprout hummed thoughtfully. "They don't usually take to students this quickly," she said, more to herself than anything. Iris snorted from beside her, still wrestling with her own plant. "Take two. Mine's trying to murder me." "Firm grip, miss." "I have a firm grip." Snap. "Clearer intentions," Sprout corrected calmly. Iris blinked. "It can sense my intentions." Hayley tried not to laugh. Sprout's gaze returned briefly to Hayley. There was something, knowing there. But she didn't push, not yet anyways. "Carry on," she said, moving away to assist another struggling student. Iris leaned in the second she was gone. "Okay," she whispered, eyes wide. "You cannot tell me that's normal." Hayley glanced down at the plant, brushing a bit of soil from its leaves. It leaned slightly into the touch. "I don't think it is," she admitted. Iris stared at her before looking at the plant and then back at her. "You're not secretly a plant whisperer, are you?" Hayley smirked faintly. "Wouldn't you like to know?" Iris pointed at her. "I would, actually. That's the problem." Around them, the greenhouse remained loud, chaotic, and slightly dangerous. But at Hayley's table, everything was calm and controlled. Like the plants had already decided. She wasn't something to fight, but she was something to listen to. Chapter 39. Hi, Mom, Dad. Time skip, garden. After class, Hayley and Iris drifted toward the gardens, escaping the noise of the castle as if it had been a shared, unspoken decision. The air was softer here. Warmer. Spring had fully settled over Hogwarts, flowers blooming in clusters along the stone paths, the lake glinting in the distance like glass under the sun. Hayley dropped down onto the grass first, stretching her legs out in front of her, tilting her face toward the sky. "Merlin," she muttered. "I forgot what silence sounded like." Iris laughed softly, sitting beside her, tucking her legs under herself. "You mean not Jake screaming about flying every 5 minutes?" Hayley huffed a quiet laugh. "Or Rory acting like he's already a professional Quidditch player." A comfortable pause settled between them. Not awkward. Never awkward. Just easy. Iris plucked a small daisy from beside her, twirling it between her fingers. So, summer. Hayley turned her head slightly, watching her. Yeah, summer. There was something softer in her voice now. Something lighter. I'm actually excited this time, Hayley admitted. I get to go home properly. No weirdness, no running around, no chaos. Iris raised an eyebrow. No chaos, you. I don't believe that for a second. Hayley smiled, small but genuine. Okay, less chaos. A beat. Then, I miss them. It came out quieter than she expected. Iris's expression softened instantly. Your parents. Hayley nodded, staring up at the sky again. Yeah, I mean I see them, but not like before, not just normal. She exhaled slowly. I just want a few weeks where I can just be their kid again, you know. Iris didn't answer right away. Instead, she leaned her shoulder lightly against Hayley's. I think they'd want that too. Hayley smiled at that. Soft. Grateful. Then, after a moment, what about you? Hayley asked. Any big plans? Iris shrugged. Nothing dramatic, just home, family, probably too much food. Hayley snorted. That sounds amazing. Another pause. Then Iris nudged her slightly. You're writing to them, aren't you? Hayley blinked. What? Your parents, Iris said, smirking a little. You've got that look. The I'm about to emotionally ramble in a letter look. Hayley rolled her eyes. I do not have a look. You absolutely do. Okay, maybe I do. They both laughed. And just like that, the moment settled into something warm. Something steady. Time skip, Gryffindor common room, evening. The common room buzzed with end-of-year energy. Half-packed trunks, scattered books, laughter echoing off the walls. Hayley sat curled up in one of the armchairs near the fire, parchment spread across her lap, quill in hand. For once, she didn't hesitate as she started writing. Hi, Mum, Dad. I'm coming home soon, and I can't even explain how excited I am. This year's been a lot, good, but a lot. I think I've changed a bit, not in a bad way, just grown, I guess. I really just want to come home, sit with you both, and not think about anything complicated for a while. Also, I have stories, so many stories. You're not ready. I miss you. Love. Hayley. She paused, then added, smaller. Really, I miss you. Hayley stared at the page for a second, something warm settling in her chest. Chapter 40, the book he left behind. Time skip, common room. Hayley looked up just in time to see James sprinting through the common room, bag half open, hair a mess like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. Behind him, you're always late. How are you always late? Sirius's voice echoed faintly from the stairs. I'm not always late. This is a one-time thing. It's never a one-time thing. Hayley blinked, watching them in mild amusement as James hurried toward the portrait hole. And in his rush, something slipped from his bag. A book. It hit the floor with a soft thud. James didn't notice. James, wait. Remus's voice called from somewhere behind. Too late. They were gone. The portrait slammed shut. Silence lingered for half a second. Hayley frowned slightly, then leaned forward, reaching down to pick up the book. It was old. Worn. Definitely not standard coursework. She turned it over in her hands. The title was slightly faded, but still readable. Advanced Transfiguration, Human to Animal Conversion. Hayley blinked. She flipped it open, skimming a page. Dense notes. Complex diagrams. Way above anything they were currently learning. Her brows furrowed slightly. Why is James reading this? She didn't sound suspicious. Just curious. She closed the book slowly, resting it on her lap. Something about it lingered in her mind. Unanswered. Unimportant, for now. Time skip, Great Hall end-of-year feast. The Great Hall was alive with color and noise, banners shifting above them as the house points were tallied. Gold, red, green, and blue rippled across the enchanted ceiling, flickering like they couldn't decide where to settle. Students leaned forward in anticipation, whispers spreading like wildfire. Hayley sat beside Iris, fingers lightly tapping against the table. "Who do you think?" Iris murmured. Hayley shrugged. "Honestly, could be anyone this year." "Not Hufflepuff," someone further down the table muttered. "Hey," a Hufflepuff snapped back. Hayley smirked faintly. Then Albus Dumbledore stood. The room quieted instantly. Even the floating candles seemed to still. "Another year gone," he began, eyes twinkling. "And what a year it has been." A few students laughed nervously. Others just stared, waiting. Hayley barely listened to the speech. Her focus drifted to the feeling of it ending, of something shifting, of something waiting just out of reach. Then, Dumbledore clasped his hands together. The House Cup. The entire hall leaned in. Has been fiercely contested this year. A ripple of tension moved through the tables. In fourth place, a pause. Hufflepuff. A mix of groans and good-natured applause came from the Hufflepuff table. "Oi, we tried," someone called, raising a goblet. Hayley smiled slightly. Dumbledore continued, voice calm, measured. In third place, another pause. Gryffindor. The Gryffindor table reacted instantly. "What? No way. That's rigged." Hayley blinked, then laughed under her breath as a few people dramatically slumped forward onto the table. Iris nudged her. "You took that well." "I'm choosing peace," Hayley muttered, though she was still grinning. Dumbledore raised a hand, silencing the noise. In second place. Now the room was tense. Slytherin and Ravenclaw both sat straighter. Slytherin. The Slytherin table gave a mix of polite claps and sharp sighs, a few clearly irritated. One student muttered, "Next year." That left a beat. A single, suspended moment where everything held its breath. Then, the House Cup goes to. Hayley's fingers stilled. Iris leaned forward. The banners above flickered. Red. Green. Gold. Then, a Ravenclaw. Blue and bronze flooded the Great Hall instantly, banners transforming in a rush of color. The Ravenclaw table erupted into cheers, students jumping to their feet, some hugging, others pounding the table in excitement. Groans and laughter echoed from the others. "All right, fair," someone at Gryffindor admitted. Hayley clapped anyway, smiling as she glanced at Iris. "Guess they earned it." Iris smiled back. "Told you it could be anyone." Food appeared instantly, covering the tables in a feast that felt almost overwhelming. For a while, everything softened. Laughter. Food. Friends. No questions. No mysteries. Just the end of a year. Time skip, Hogwarts Express. Steam billowed across the platform as students loaded their trunks, voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony of goodbyes. Inside one of the compartments, Hayley sat across from Iris, knees pulled up slightly, watching the scenery blur past as the train began to move. A quiet settled between them again. Familiar. Comfortable. Then Hayley spoke. "So." Iris glanced at her. "So." Hayley hesitated for half a second, which for her was a lot. Then, "Next year," she said, trying to sound normal, "do you maybe want to, I don't know, hang out more, like not just classes, properly?" Iris blinked as a small smile started to form. "Are you asking me out?" she said lightly, "or scheduling friendship time?" Hayley groaned. "Don't make it weird." "I'm not making it weird. You're making it weird." "I'm not." Iris laughed softly. "Yeah," she said, "I'd like that." Hayley smiled. And this time, it stayed.